Hey guys, tonight we're heading back, way back, to ancient Egypt, where the air is thick with incense, the walls are draped in linen, and the most powerful woman in the world smells like cardamom, rose, and maybe a hint of crushed beetle wing. You're not just watching history tonight. You're stepping barefoot onto the cool marble of Cleopatra's palace, where diplomats stammer, poets sigh, and every corridor smells faintly of something exotic and vaguely intimidating. You'll try not to sneeze. As usual, you probably won't survive this world for more than an hour. The food's great, sure, but the dental care is non-existent, and one wrong glance at the queen could earn you a polite but irreversible exile to the desert. And let's not even talk about the plumbing. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. I always love seeing that little global clock tick. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You arrive just as the Alexandrian sun lowers itself toward the horizon like a lazy golden coin. The harbor outside Cleopatra's palace buzzes with ships from every direction. Rome, India, the Greek islands, even some clunky vessels from far-off Nubia. But inside the palace? Quiet. Heavy curtains filter the light into warm stripes across alabaster floors. Linen robes whisper as they move past you. Every surface, floor, furniture, even the guards, seems to have been dabbed with something fragrant. You trail behind an official who smells like myrrh and disapproval. He mumbles titles as he walks, something about you being an honored observer from an unthreatening foreign land. Very unthreatening, he insists. Extremely neutral. You nod. He leads you through cool halls, past carved columns and into the atrium, where a marble basin holds petals floating lazily in scented water. You're not sure whether to drink from it or wash your hands, so you settle for staring at it meaningfully until someone does one or the other. And then you hear her voice. It's not booming or regal, it's playful, almost conspiratorial. And close. Cleopatra's speaking with her handmaidens, laughing softly at a joke that probably cost some scribe his job. She turns to you and everything slows. You expect grandeur? She offers curiosity. Her dress is simple by royal standards, but her scent. Oh, her scent is a production in itself. Sweet but spicy, floral but warm, with a kind of smoky depth that seems designed to make you forget your own name. You inhale and instantly regret it. Your eyes water just a little. A guard discreetly offers you a linen square to dab your face. It's pre-scented. Of course it is. Cleopatra welcomes you with a nod, and you realize she's testing you. Not your intellect, not your political savvy. Your nose. She's watching your reaction to her carefully blended aura. Will you compliment it? Will you flinch? Will you sneeze? You murmur something vaguely complimentary about garden breezes. She smiles. You're not thrown to the crocodiles. Success. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra's famously enchanting presence was more about looks, voice, or scent, but most agree she knew how to use all three like a symphony. She wasn't just a ruler, she was a performance. As you're ushered deeper into the palace, you begin to notice it's not just Cleopatra who smells like a divine offering. Every surface has a lingering note. The floor smells faintly of cedar, the cushions are laced with lavender. Even the ink used by scribes has a faint floral sharpness to it. One scribe glances up from his scroll and offers a polite nod, his hair lightly powdered with some lemony dust. You wonder whether the scent is meant to improve memory or repel insects, or both. Possibly both. You're brought to your quarters. Yes, even observers get quarters. The sheets are linen, of course, and the pillow has been subtly perfumed with lotus. It's supposed to calm the mind. It does. You flop onto the bed and immediately regret the enthusiastic motion. The linens are crisp, and you now smell like a pressed bouquet. As twilight wraps the palace in cooler tones, torches flicker to life, and the aroma shifts again. Evening oils, thicker, smokier. You're told dinner is soon, but for now, someone draws a shallow bath for you. Not for hygiene, though that's a bonus, but to help your body absorb the evening perfumes better. You lower yourself into the tepid water, which has petals, oils, and something else you can't quite place. Maybe citrus, maybe something that used to be citrus. Either way, your skin feels like it's slowly being convinced to join a royal cult of fragrance. From your tub, you hear the distant sounds of lyres tuning up and someone practicing flattery in Greek. You're not expected to speak much tonight. Just observe. Just breathe in. Just absorb. And maybe try not to get too distracted by the fact that the air here has texture. As if every molecule has been weighed, scented, and approved before it touches your face. A gentle knock interrupts your meditative state. It's the same official, still smelling of disapproval and myrrh. Dinner, he says. The queen awaits. Also, there will be more scent-based surprises. He doesn't say that part, but it's in his eyes. You towel off with linen that smells like warm river stones. You slip into borrowed robes that are either infused with mint or extremely well aired. Probably both. And as you follow the official down the flickering halls of Cleopatra's palace, you start to realize this isn't just politics. It's not just hospitality. It's olfactory warfare, and Cleopatra is winning. You're not exactly sure what you expected Cleopatra's private garden to look like. Maybe something modest, some vines, a fig tree, perhaps a carefully trimmed bush shaped like a sphinx. Instead, you're led through a narrow, jasmine-lined walkway that opens suddenly into a sun-drenched oasis, so full of green it feels audacious. A full botanical kingdom, really, hemmed in by limestone walls and thick with flowers, herbs, and trees that definitely don't belong to this climate. The air is syrupy with scent. You breathe in, immediately overwhelmed. Sweet lemon balm, bitter frankincense, wild basil, honeyed blue lotus, maybe even cinnamon bark. Somewhere, something is definitely flowering that smells suspiciously like freshly baked bread. You're not hungry, but you want to eat the entire garden anyway. A gardener, barefoot, sun-wrinkled, and cheerfully indifferent to your presence, passes by carrying a small clay jar filled with thick green paste. He murmurs something about macerating the oud resin, then disappears behind a curtain of hanging lavender. You spot Cleopatra at the far end of the garden, seated beneath a flowering sycamore fig. She's reading a scroll and gently fanning herself with what appears to be a palm leaf dipped in rosewater. She glances up and waves you forward. "This," she says, gesturing at the lush surroundings, "is my nose's laboratory." It is not modest, it is not subtle, it is, however, impressive. You follow her through a winding path shaded by pomegranate trees and date palms. She stops occasionally to pinch a leaf or stroke the rough bark of a sandalwood sapling. "Imported from the Indus," she says proudly. "Took nearly 2 years to root properly." She sniffs it and shrugs, still shy. Every plant, she explains, has a mood, not just a scent. Jasmine is flirtatious. Myrrh is thoughtful. Papyrus? Papyrus smells like bureaucracy and should not be used in seduction. Ever. As you walk, a small monkey, yes, a monkey, swings overhead carrying what appears to be a pouch of dried herbs. It flings it down and misses the queen's head by a polite 6 inches. "That's for the elephants," she says. "They hate mint, but it keeps the flies off." You nod like this is something you've always known. Historians still debate whether Cleopatra's gardens were purely personal or an extension of statecraft. Some argue they were designed as a space for private rituals and aesthetic pleasure. Others believe they functioned as subtle displays of power. After all, if you can get cinnamon trees to grow in the Egyptian sun, you can probably get Roman generals to sit down and listen. You reach a shady stone bench where small bees hum around a cluster of blue lotus flowers. Cleopatra picks one, crushes it between her fingers, and lifts it to your nose. "This," she says, "is what the gods dream about." You nod again, eyes watering. Fun fact, the blue lotus was mildly psychoactive. Ancient Egyptians used it for everything from religious ceremonies to casual hangouts. It supposedly induced relaxation, mild euphoria, and extremely vivid dreams. some of which featured gods giving out life advice like celestial guidance counselors. You feel a little floaty just from the scent. Cleopatra gestures toward a small clay urn, half buried beneath a flowering shrub. She tells you it contains preserved ambergris, a waxy, strangely valuable substance that comes from the digestive system of sperm whales. It smells like ocean thunder, she says, but only after it's rotted a bit, like good philosophy. You try to look wise. You fail. 2 servants appear with trays of chilled drinks. Yours smells faintly of cardamom and has flower petals floating on top. You sip it cautiously. It tastes like what a perfume bottle might drink if it were parched. Strangely delicious. Cleopatra reclines slightly, watching you. Romans don't understand gardens, she muses. They plant for order, squares, symmetry. Their plants are obedient. My plants are ambitious. You glance around. She's not wrong. This is less a garden and more a wild theater production. A turtle clambers slowly over a crushed sandalwood branch, entirely unbothered by your presence. A breeze picks up carrying a swirling mix of lavender, cumin, and something sharper, frankincense perhaps, across your face. It's hypnotic, like standing inside a musical chord made of smells. You ask her if she experiments with all of this. Oh, constantly, she says. Every mood needs a blend, every meeting a scent. When I want to be feared, I wear leather soaked in vetiver. When I want to be adored, well? She trails off, smiling. It's said that Cleopatra's perfume preferences changed daily. Some texts suggest she had personal blends for different hours of the day. Others hint that she used scent to disarm rivals, to court allies, even to soothe herself in moments of grief. There's no consensus, but there are stories. One of your favorite details, which you whisper to yourself as you trail behind her again. Some ancient Egyptian perfumes were so thick and sticky they had to be melted before use. People would store them in little cones that sat on top of the head and slowly drip down throughout the day, releasing scent and probably attracting curious insects. You ask bravely if Cleopatra uses the cones. She laughs. Only when I want someone to notice. The sun begins to sink behind the palace walls. The air cools just enough for the scent of the flowers to lift and shift. You notice the night-blooming jasmine beginning to open its petals. Already it's sending out long, soft trails of sweetness. Cleopatra inhales deeply. That, she says, is the perfume of diplomacy. You believe her. A servant announces something in a low tone. The queen nods, rises, and tells you to follow. It's time to see where the magic happens. You expect a throne room. Instead, she leads you toward a stone stairwell shaded by fig leaves and trellised vines. You descend. The temperature drops. The air thickens. Somewhere below, someone is grinding something with intense purpose. You've reached the laboratory. You descend carefully, hand grazing a smooth stone wall, as the sounds of Alexandria fade behind you, and the cooler air curls around your ankles like a polite ghost. The stairway spirals slowly, lit by flickering oil lamps set into recesses in the walls. Each step carries you deeper into what Cleopatra laughingly calls her little olfactory dungeon. Eventually, the stone gives way to something softer, sand packed into the floor, perhaps to absorb dropped oils or broken jars. You step into a low-ceilinged room with thick wooden beams and strange hanging herbs. The smell? A hurricane of crushed petals, fermented roots, beeswax, and something that might be goat. Or possibly philosopher. It's hard to say. The space is cluttered but orderly. Dozens of amphorae line one wall, each marked in delicate demotic script. Some are sealed with wax, others corked with cloth, and tied in what you suspect is a knot only an experienced priestess or a determined monkey could undo. A long work table dominates the center, covered in bowls, mortars, pestles, tiny spoons, and one very smug-looking cat. The cat eyes you suspiciously. It smells faintly of cinnamon. You suspect this is not accidental. This, Cleopatra says, gesturing with a flair that suggests both pride and mild amusement, is where empires are softened at the edges. Historians still argue whether Cleopatra blended her own perfumes or merely commissioned them from the royal perfumers. Some say she studied with the alchemists of the Serapeum. Others insist she merely offered feedback. Very pointed, very specific feedback. Either way, her involvement in the process is not in doubt. You watch as she picks up a tiny curved blade and begins slicing bark. Cassia, she says, a cousin to cinnamon, but sharper, bolder. It's what you wear, she explains, when you need to speak first in a room full of men who think they invented debate. The sliced bark goes into a small stone bowl, followed by cardamom pods cracked open with the flat of her knife and a few drops of what she calls sun-thickened myrrh. She grinds the mixture in slow circles, the scent rising with every motion. You lean in slightly too far and sneeze, sending a puff of spice into the air. The cat glares. She laughs and hands you a damp cloth soaked in rosewater. Don't inhale unless you mean it. You ask how she knows when a perfume is finished. You don't, she says. Not really. Some you wear and wait. Some you adjust by the hour, and some... She gestures to a dark blue jar sealed with gold wire. You just stop before you ruin the magic. She cracks the seal and wafts a faint plume toward your face. It smells like midnight on a riverbank. Cool, floral, a little melancholic, like memory steeped in honey. I wore this, she says softly, when Julius first arrived. You almost say Julius who, but catch yourself just in time. The memory in her face answers the question. You learn that she's recorded over 24 perfume formulas in her own hand. Not in scrolls, not safe enough, but etched into wax tablets hidden in sealed compartments. She changes the formulas often, sometimes just for fun. Too much rose, you sound desperate. Too much clove, you smell like a merchant trying to close a deal in the rain. She opens another jar. This one smells of almond and smoke. For funerals, she says casually. Not mine, hopefully. You spot a narrow shelf near the far wall lined with tiny clay phials. Some look ancient, even by ancient standards. She tells you those are experimental. Frankincense steeped in honey wine, crushed scarab shells mixed with orchid root, essence of Nile silt. Smells terrible, she warns, but effective against bad dreams. You raise a brow, she shrugs. Dreams are political too. A short scroll sits rolled beside the phials, and she offers it to you to examine. It's a list, not ingredients, but emotions. Longing, defiance, grief, hope, and next to each, a blend. You realize this isn't a hobby, it's a lexicon. Cleopatra doesn't just wear perfume, she speaks with it. Rome, she says suddenly, smells of iron and sweat. They don't understand softness, they think it's weakness. You ask what she thinks Rome needs. She smiles, dipping a finger into a small pot of oil thick with crushed violet. Something that makes them remember they're mortal. Something that lingers on their cloak until they wonder if they imagined it. You suspect more than one Roman has returned home confused and vaguely wistful. There's a small chest in the corner, guarded by another cat. This one older, rounder, and smelling like cedar. Cleopatra opens it and reveals a row of crystalline vials nested in velvet. These, she says, are for war. You're not sure what war smells like until she opens one. It hits you like thunder. Patchouli, black pepper, burned figure. It's dark and commanding and smells like someone who would absolutely take your ships and your dignity with a handwritten thank you note. You stagger slightly. She caps the bottle and chuckles. Effective, yes? You nod, eyes watering again. A small bell sounds somewhere above. Cleopatra wipes her hands, replaces the lids, and tells you it's time for a different kind of scent lesson. Let's go meet some noses, she says cryptically, leading you back up the stairs. You follow, feeling as though your own sense of smell has just completed military training. You've sniffed grief, diplomacy, seduction, and war. You're ready for anything. Probably. You emerge from the cool, perfumed dark into warm, late afternoon sun, blinking like someone who spent too long in a scented cave. Which, to be fair, you just did. Cleopatra doesn't miss a beat. She adjusts a tiny bottle hanging from her wrist like a charm and leads you along a colonnade toward what she calls the Gallery of Noses. You raise an eyebrow. She only grins. The gallery, it turns out, is not a metaphor. You are quite literally walking into a room filled with marble busts, each one perfectly sculpted, each one prominently featuring one very distinct nose. Some aquiline, some wide, some beaky, some broken, and at least one that looks like it lost a fight with a chariot. It's a whole collection of olfactory personalities. Romans, Cleopatra says, are obsessed with noses. The bigger the better, ideally attached to someone very stern and extremely judgmental. You stifle a laugh. She's not wrong. She pauses in front of a particularly grand nose belonging to a man you recognize vaguely from old coins and dry historical lectures. Pompey the Great, maybe? Or was it someone who tried to be? She doesn't clarify. She just taps the tip of the marble nose thoughtfully. Historians still argue, she says, whether Rome judged character by the nose or if they just pretended to, because the real power was always somewhere else. You lean in, examining the exaggerated ridge and carefully carved nostrils. It's a good nose in the way that stone noses can be good. Cleopatra clearly disagrees. They called mine too small, she says, waving airily. Or too sharp, or too foreign, or too Greek. You'd think I'd tried to conquer the Senate with my septum. There's a faint bitterness beneath the humor. You suspect she's heard enough whispered opinions about her face to wallpaper the entire library of Alexandria. She walks past several more busts, each one labeled in tiny script. One nose was politely stern, another decisively wealthy. One particularly unfortunate profile is simply labeled Senator Number. 47 disagreed. Often. You arrive at a low bench nestled between two bronze statues of hawks. Cleopatra sits and gestures for you to join her. She picks up a scroll from the side table, yes, there's furniture even here, and unrolls it. It's a list of nose shapes. Roman, Egyptian, Nubian, Hellenic, Parthian, each paired with personality traits. You read silently. Roman nose, brave, noble, smells danger before it arrives. Egyptian nose, clever, diplomatic, smells politics from a mile away. Greek nose, beautiful but opinionated, smells mostly itself. Parthian nose, mysterious, aggressive, smells like horses and judgment. You blink. These are oddly specific, she shrugs. Science, probably. The conversation turns to the politics of profile. You learn that statues, coins, and portraits were all curated with exquisite care, and nose shape wasn't just about vanity, it was about branding. Want to look heroic? Straighten that bridge. Want to appear generous? Broaden the nostrils slightly. Want to hide a nervous temperament? Never sculpt the nose mid-sniff. Mine? Cleopatra says, tapping the side of her own nose. Was considered untrustworthy by Roman standards. Too subtle, not enough declaration. She doesn't seem too bothered. Fun fact, ancient Romans often made snap judgments about people based on their noses, and a whole cottage industry emerged around physiognomy, the practice of reading moral character from facial features. Cleopatra mocks the idea gently, but acknowledges the pressure. You had to be your own propaganda, she says, preferably with cheekbones. The gallery of noses contains one oddity, a small bronze nose mounted alone on a pedestal. Cleopatra grins at your confused expression. That, she says, belonged to a rival who kept claiming I bewitched Caesar with my perfumes. One day she sneezed at court and blamed me. You ask what happened to her. She's not in the gallery of ears, she replies, and then immediately changes the subject. Back in the heart of the gallery, she shows you a shelf containing tiny clay perfume vessels, each one shaped like a different nose. You blink. Training tools, she explains. You smell through the shape. The scent changes depending on the curve of the clay. It sounds like nonsense. Then she hands you one. an almond-shaped nose filled with crushed marjoram and blue lotus. You sniff. It's soft, sleepy, almost sad. She swaps it for a long Roman-style nose filled with pepper oil and pine resin. You recoil. It smells like an argument in a forest. She chuckles. Perception is architecture. There's a lesson here buried beneath the layers of fragrance and cheeky critique. Cleopatra understands perception like a second language. She knows when to lean into myth, when to soften a room with scent, and when to weaponize an eyebrow. She leans back, tossing a small sachet of lavender toward a brazier where it crackles gently. The scent rises, mellow and grounding. Let the Romans talk about noses, she says. Mine smells victory just fine. As you sit there, surrounded by sculpted profiles and perfumed clay, the sun angles low through the columns, casting long shadows across the floor. The cat from earlier slips silently in and curls up beneath the bust of a particularly majestic nostril. You realize you haven't thought about time in hours. You've wandered through gardens and formulas, profiles and politics, and somehow all of it returns to the same central theme. Power disguised as pleasure. And perfume, worn like a secret. The scent of lavender still lingers as you rise from the bench and follow Cleopatra through a corridor flanked by more busts and the occasional torch bracket. The light softens. The floor grows warmer beneath your sandals, as if the building itself has absorbed centuries of heated conversation. You reach a smaller chamber tucked away like a secret thought. No statues here, just walls lined with polished cedar panels and scroll niches. Cleopatra calls it her scent library. Each shelf is filled with scrolls and tablets, yes, but also little ceramic flasks sealed with beeswax, strips of perfumed linen, fragments of resins wrapped in silk. The room smells like 20 kinds of memory. Some happy, some uncomfortable, some too complex to name. She reaches into a compartment and pulls out a long, narrow piece of papyrus with faint ink markings. This, she says, is a recipe for a scent they wore in Thebes during the festival of Oped. It was said to make you dream more vividly. You sniff the edge of the scroll, expecting dust, but no. There's a faint whiff of something green and spiced, like basil dipped in honey and sun. Cleopatra hands you a cloth-wrapped bundle, and you open it to find a tiny cake of solid perfume, etched with the eye of Horus. You press it under your collarbone, she explains. By morning, your dreams will have stronger opinions than you do. You ask how she got her hands on so many ancient formulas. She grins. 1 librarian, 3 bribes, and a royal marriage proposal I didn't mean. Scholars today debate whether Cleopatra actively studied perfumery through Egypt's sacred texts or relied on temple priestesses to pass knowledge down to her. What's clear is that she had access to formulae dating back over 1,000 years. Some of them likely copied from even older documents that no longer exist. Fragrance here isn't trend. It's ritual. You notice a list etched into one cedar panel. Ingredients paired with effects. Henna bark, clarity blue lotus, surrender, galbanum, boldness, goat fat, grounding. Cleopatra rolls her eyes at this one. Myrrh, divine favor. She points to a shelf labeled Alexandrian Variants, which houses more experimental blends, like frankincense-infused wine reductions, pomegranate oil laced with ground opal, allegedly to enhance passion, though she notes it mostly makes people sneeze, and one ominously labeled papyrus fish blend. You do not ask questions about that one. The scent library also holds scent scrolls, not recipes, but accounts. She reads one aloud, the voice slipping into rhythm as the scribe once wrote, "He arrived with camel dust and juniper on his cloak. She wore cedar, warmed on her skin for hours, and his guards forgot their weapons." Cleopatra looks up, amused. Poetry, yes, but also branding. You chuckle, and she tosses you a scroll. It unfurls easily. This one is drier, more practical, written by a court advisor outlining what perfumes best conceal nerves before a political negotiation. You skim phrases like lavender on the wrist to project calm and sandalwood behind ears to seem older. There's a certain irony you note in controlling perception through fragrance when your political opponents are literally sculpting propaganda out of stone. Cleopatra opens a low drawer and reveals a delicate fan made from ostrich feathers, soaked in neroli and bergamot. Julius thought it was just to cool myself, she says with a smirk. He didn't realize it was also how I conditioned the air between us. You try it. The scent trails like silk. It changes the space, softens the corners of the room. You suddenly wonder how much of Roman diplomacy was conducted under the unknowing influence of invisible citrus mist. And then Cleopatra pulls out something you truly didn't expect. A letter? Folded, sealed, tucked in a tiny wooden box. From a Roman noblewoman, she says, asking me for a recipe. She wanted to impress her dinner guests. I sent her one that smells like fresh figs, crushed laurel, and very expensive silence. You ask if the noblewoman ever thanked her. She sent a bottle of wine, Cleopatra says, sipping imaginary poison from her wrist. It smelled like defeat and raisins. A brief silence settles, warm and filled with drifting sandalwood. You realize Cleopatra's not just documenting the past, she's curating it. Fragrance becomes archive. Each jar and scroll a footnote of a life lived on multiple frequencies. The wind outside shifts. A breeze enters through a carved slit in the wall, lifting the edge of a scroll. Cleopatra catches it with her fingers, her bracelets chiming faintly. Come, she says. Let's walk through the garden before the scent of dusk disappears. As you exit the scent library, one thought lingers. No matter how much Rome chisels or decrees, some legacies are written in air. You follow Cleopatra through a narrow passage lit by small oil lamps, each releasing the faint aroma of roasted almond and fig. The air shifts, cooler and moist, until finally you step into what feels like another world. Her nighttime garden. Not the sun-soaked promenades or formal paths of the palace gardens, no. This is something different. An enclosed space of soft moss underfoot, dark green walls of cypress and myrtle, and a ceiling open to the moon. Night-blooming jasmine coils up trellises, and somewhere unseen a fountain trickles like a whisper. Cleopatra gestures for you to sit on a low-cushioned bench beside her. Scent changes at night, she says, as if continuing a conversation from hours ago. The same rose smells different under moonlight, like it's remembering something it's not supposed to. You nod, unsure whether she's joking. Possibly both. Tonight, she explains, is for testing sleep perfumes. Mixtures meant not to seduce, impress, or command, but to ease the body into rest. You lean back, exhaling, already halfway there. She opens a cedar box and reveals half a dozen scent cones, solid perfume pyramids molded from beeswax and oils, meant to melt slowly in the heat of your skin. You remember reading about them somewhere, maybe in a dusty museum label. Ancient Egyptians often wore them on